Maybe I should be on the right and you should be on the left. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Frank Kuntz. I'm the mayor of the city of Wenatchee, and welcome to the Rotary Recital Hall at the Wenatchee Valley College campus. For those of you that haven't been in this building, it's a pretty amazing place. I was here for a TEDx conference a couple of years ago, and what an incredibly beautiful spot. We get to spend an hour with our 8th District Congresswoman, Kim Schrier. So, Kim, welcome to Wenatchee again. I say this regularly, and you don't like to joke anymore, but she does make me look bad because she spends more time in Wenatchee than I do, I think, sometimes. So, she's here quite often and is really doing a remarkable job for our valley, and we've worked very closely on a number of things, mostly transportation sort of issues, but others as well. So, always a pleasure to have Congresswoman Schrier. So, I guess I'll give you the mic for some opening remarks, and then we'll start with some questions.
That sounds great. Mayor, thank you for hosting today and always so warmly welcoming me to Wenatchee. I'm thrilled to be here. We've been doing this since probably my first week in Congress. And you are always just so warm and welcoming, and it is always a pleasure.
So help me, is this year 4? Year 6?
This is year 4.
Okay. Shows you how my math works. I'm in year 11, so I lose track of it.
Yeah, and I had to double check myself. Yeah, this is year 4. I'm right up there, with my teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to be back. And we've been working, first of all, there's no man here more than you. You're here all the time. But we have worked very closely together, especially this last year. So I want to welcome all of you here. Thank you for spending the next hour with me, with us. I'm excited to be back in person, seeing real faces, whole real faces too. I'm excited that we're at a time during this pandemic where we can finally do this again. I also want to first just acknowledge that it feels like a pretty dark time right now. It feels like civility is at an all-time low. We've got war in Ukraine, people suffering around the world. Gas prices are $5 a gallon where I am, not much lower here. Grocery prices are up, but here's the thing. We've been working together on some really good issues, and we have some really good news that I'd love to just share a little bit with you about how when you send a community pediatrician to represent you in Congress, I go to bat for you just the way that I have always done for my patients, thinking about you one person at a time and as a collective. So many of you sent me to be a pragmatic, independent voice who would keep her eye on the needs of the 8th District, and that is exactly what I've done. I work with both parties to just do common sense things. And I'm talking about working with both parties, doctors to bring down the cost of prescription drugs and to get rid of surprise billing. I'm talking about working with a Republican member of Congress, Simpson from Idaho, who has forest in his district, just like we have forest here, on the idea of restoring forest health and preventing catastrophic wildfires. And so, in every way, I'm looking to deliver for you. I also want to talk just 2 more things. Actually 3 more things. So one is, I'm really excited that when I was running for Congress in 2017 or 18, we went to your office, you showed me this big map on the wall, and you said, this is our #1 priority, the Apple Capital Loop. And I studied up, and each year I went to the Department of Transportation and made a really strong case for why this project should get funding, should get infra-grant funding, that's what it's called. And we didn't get it in 2019, we didn't get it in 2020, but in 2021, and I think this has to do with taking cosmic crisp apples to Secretary Buttigieg at one point. And I reminded him that that's it. I think that maybe because of that, I made another really great case for why this was so important and important to the rural parts of the 8th District, and that this would be a huge win And we got it funded, and we didn't just get it funded. This was the biggest infra grant in the entire country, over $93 million. And just for perspective, it feels so good to say that. I mean, we were just grinning ear to ear when we heard that. Just for perspective, and then there's another grant that came to Washington State, the West Seattle Bridge, $11 million. So I want you to feel super special that we got this done, and that because you sent in Congress, we brought this home to you all. I also want to mention some community funding projects like A Place for Alice in Leavenworth, like broadband, high-speed internet in Entiat. Those are local and a really big deal. And I'm hoping to go to that for Douglas PUD, where they are working on green hydrogen and hoping to make this hydrogen hub, one of just a handful in the country. Last two things. One is, I just want to remind you about constituent services. I did not know that this was something that offices for members of Congress did. But it is one of the most important things we do, because this is how we touch people on an individual basis. If you are frustrated, pulling your hair out because you are so sick and tired of dealing with the VA or Social Security or Medicare or whatever it is, just call our office. We are here to help. I have the most amazing staff. Many in this room, I see Kevin here. We have Aaron in the back. Louise is somewhere. Jenna is somewhere out here. And Kelly has been serving this area. We're losing her, but Kelly has been amazing. Thank you, Kelly. So please know that if you're frustrated with the bureaucracies of the federal government, please call my office. We can help a ton. All right, last, I just want to thank our two officers in the back of the room here. Thank you for coming early and keeping all of us safe, and we hope we don't need your services at all, but I am very grateful for your being here, and I think I can speak for all of us in saying that we are grateful for everything you do to keep our community safe. So with that, why don't we get into questions?
Thank you, Congresswoman. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with her on the infra grant. That was a very happy day in our offices when we got notified that we were awarded $92.5 million, and then we were able to part of that in Olympia with the last transportation package for the final $85 million. So the Alpha Capital Loop set of projects, which includes Confluence Parkway, is a fully funded project. And Congresswoman Schrier, bless her heart, when we needed her in Olympia, she was able to work in Olympia as well on our behalf. And a lot of times people don't understand that it's not just, we think of her as representing us in Washington, D.C., but there's times when we needed her other places, and she was very helpful in working through that process as well, so thank you. So now I gotta get my glasses on, because we've got a host of questions. So we'll start with the first. This is from Mark in Chelan, who says, how has the debate on military assistance for Ukraine been?
What debate? There is virtually no debate in Washington, D.C. between Democrats and Republicans in understanding that Putin is evil, that Ukraine needs our help, that supporting Ukraine is absolutely imperative, that this is not just about Ukraine, it is about democracy versus authoritarianism around the world, and that we want to do everything we can and supply whatever we can in terms of weaponry and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine to help make sure they win and Putin loses. No debate.
Excellent. So a question here regarding our southern border, and there's sort of two of them here, and I'll just sort of read them together, because I think they sort of go together. Larry G. from Wenatchee says, do you defend the Biden administration's policies on our southern border? Yes or no? If no, what have you done to, what would you have done to change? And I think the second is sort of express your feelings regarding the president's plan to close Title 42. And if Title 42 is closed, how are we going to protect against the known criminals crossing the border? That's from Faye Wilson in Wenatchee.
So there is chaos at our southern border. And whatever we're doing right now, it's not working. Regardless of Title 42, which for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a public health rule that is meant to protect public health by not allowing people in during the pandemic. From a medical standpoint, now that we have vaccines and treatments and our hospitals are not overcrowded, from a medical standpoint, I think that time has expired for that. My concern is that this administration, I don't think, has a plan for what to do at our southern border. And we need a plan for an orderly and humane and thoughtful way to allow people seeking refuge and amnesty to make their case in front of a judge, and for those cases to be heard fairly and promptly. And we don't have that in place right now. So they know that I have that concern because I have let them know that I have that concern.
Can I just add?
That we need comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, like, overall, we are decades out of date. The rules are unclear. Right now, they're incentivizing people to go around ports of entry. We cannot have that. Again, we need clear rules, we need border security, and we need a way for people to tell their story and be adjudicated in one direction or another.
So the last time we did an in-person town hall was a couple of years ago, which you may or may not remember, was just at the start of the sort of the coronavirus, and it was, we had some interesting questions, and you being a physician did a wonderful job about telling us to wash our hands, and so here we are a couple of years later, and James from Ellensburg says, do you think we should still be wearing masks on airplanes?
That's a great question. You know, I was on an airplane yesterday, and I think I will answer you just kind of the way I thought about it. And by the way, when we had that meeting, we did not at that point know that this was airborne.
No, we did not.
So I really focused on washing hands and not touching your eyes or mouth,
Yes,
which is what a pediatrician talks about all the time. So when I flew yesterday, on the first leg, I sat next to a woman who was talking and laughing pretty exuberantly the full flight, and I decided to wear a mask. Because I figured that just, it raised the risk a little bit. I did have COVID about a month ago, so I'm at virtually no risk right now, but that is one way I would think it through. On the other leg of the flight, I sat next to a man who looked concerned and had a mask on, and so I put it on just so he would not have to worry about me. And I feel like, at this point, we're at a place again where we have vaccines, we have treatments. We also have people who are traveling who don't want to ruin their vacation by getting COVID at their destination and getting stuck. So, we have masks that can prevent you from getting this regardless of what the person next to you on the plane is doing. So, if you are concerned, please wear a mask.
So half the plane wearing masks, 25%, what was your experience?
Somewhere between 50 and 80%.
Okay, we're still wearing masks.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I haven't flown yet, so I haven't had a chance to
It felt like kind of a common courtesy thing. Walking through the airport, fewer people, good ventilation, crowded together, more people put them on. Yeah, it felt okay.
All right, Justin from Renton says, how can we lower gun violence without infringing upon the Second Amendment right to carry arms? What kind of legislation do you support?
I think we're all worried about the rise in gun violence, and we should all feel safe in our communities. We should have our kids feeling safe in their schools. And I think the way that you know what I would support is to know what I've already supported. I have now twice supported a bill for universal background checks. Gun owners, non-gun owners, I think all of us, probably everybody in this room, wants to know that people holding guns are people who don't have criminal backgrounds, they're not stalkers, they're not people who pose a danger to society. So having universal background checks and closing loopholes is one really important way. The other is that, remember, I'm a pediatrician, right? And I know that guns are the number 3 cause of death in kids. Little kids. And so I just think that we need to do everything we can to keep those guns away from children. And that means, you know, whatever way you want to lock it up, we need to incentivize. So I would say those 2 things, and that weapons of war don't belong in our neighborhoods.
All right, so my friend Rich Cole's got a bunch of questions here, which I want to ask all of them because he went over the 2-question limit and had 5, but that's okay, Rich. We won't forgive you for that. So, daylight savings time. Where are we at with that?
I think I might have come full circle with this. I think all of us hate daylight savings time for 1 week twice a year, right? And then we kind of forget about it and we're fine with it. I have now looked at all of the evidence, permanent daylight savings, permanent standard time. There's disagreement about which is better. One is better for crime, as our officers probably know, right? When it's light later, there's less crime. The other is better for sleep and health. And so at this point, I think I have circled back myself to why don't we just leave things the way they are? And maybe we could take a straw poll. Can we do that? Are you all ready to vote? Okay, first is, who wants permanent daylight savings time?
One or the other.
I'm with Rich. Give us one time and don't change it during the year. That's a gut reaction. Yeah.
So, but the one time means the sun's gonna come up at like 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
That's pretty rough.
In the wintertime, yes.
Not great for kids and sleep and circadian rhythms and things. Okay, who wants standard time all time? Okay, all right, now who wants to just leave things the way they are because we're surviving with it? Okay, I hope I didn't influence any of those. Okay, yeah, so there's it has not come to the floor yet, and it has not come through my committee. It's going through a subcommittee, but not my committee.
Okay, 2-part question, so I can actually help Rich and I go over this one bit. So gas prices, inflation, anything we can do to bring down gas prices? And inflation is, obviously, it's on everybody going to the grocery store and just buying products. So comments?
Yeah, this is a tough time. I mean, I just think about these last few years. We go through a pandemic. I worked at food banks, saw nice cars coming through to pick up food. People who had never needed to rely on services before were really in a precarious position economically. Kids faced hunger, families faced hunger, a lot of parents lost jobs or had to cut back. This was a really rough time. And just as we're coming out of this pandemic, and jobs are increasing, unemployment's decreasing, we're getting finally back on our feet, gas prices go through the roof, supply chains get messed up, prices of everything are up. And that is really hard. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know about you, but I was sort of trained by my parents to always look for the cheapest gas. I don't know if that happens to everybody in their background, but it's all $5 a gallon where I am, which is really, really tough. So let me tell you some things I'm doing, because I want to do everything I can to help, even in the case of a global problem. It's not just here, it is everywhere around the world. Okay, number one is I have introduced a bill to give a holiday from the gas tax until the beginning of next year. Let's get some relief at the gas pump. Number two, I had the opportunity to question oil executives on why in the heck, at a time when we are paying through the nose for gas, why are they earning record profits and then giving those to shareholders and doing stock buybacks? It just seems like a very unpatriotic thing to do, to have everybody in this country suffering with these high prices, trying to make ends meet. Everything's going up. And meanwhile, the investors, including those executives who are the biggest investors, right, are getting wealthy. So the third thing is that I have been working on supply chain issues, because some of what's happening is a supply demand issue, and some of that is because of China. But we also have shipping companies, 6 international shipping companies that really hold all the cards on, what they're going to charge to ship goods from China here, but also what they're going to charge our apple growers and our hay growers to ship overseas. And so I introduced with some of my colleagues a bill called the Ocean Shipping Reform Act to be able to crack down on some of the exploitative practices of those international shipping companies. And I will continue to work to bring down costs.
Thanks, Congresswoman. Rich also wants to tell you that he's not impressed with the VA telephone system in Wenatchee. But a different Rich from Ellsworth wants to know what you're doing for veterans. So those are my 2 veterans questions here.
Okay, there's 2 Riches here?
There's a Rich that's here and a Rich that sent money in. So.
Okay, thank you for asking. The telephones at the VA have been such a hassle. We were hearing about this a ton from constituents. And so Jose Medina, who's not here today, he's a veteran himself and a wounded warrior fellow. And he has the primary kind of responsibility for looking out for our veterans. So he wanted to check this out. He said, why don't you just call the VA and see what happens to you? Waiting on hold, disconnected, call gets dropped. He tried this many times. Every time it was a headache and a hassle and couldn't get through. Okay, so that's the first issue that I've been grilling the Secretary of the VA about. Turned out their system was antiquated, could only handle 3 calls at a time. So they've now, because I was chewing them out for it, they've now upgraded the phone lines. They should be better. If you're still having issues though, let me know, because I've got a direct line to Dennis and Donna. I will get in touch with them and let them know. But let me tell you the other things that we're hearing from veterans, and you can tell me if you've been hearing them too, or if you're experiencing this. Taking months to get hearing aids. Taking over 4 weeks to get a pair of glasses. Are you experiencing these things? Hard to get an appointment. Hard to get to a specialist. Equipment. Take like a lot of lag time. And then the other one is that the Cerner system, the electronic health record, which is, Cerner's what I used as a pediatrician, and it worked fine. But for whatever reason, when the VA uses it, physicians who are used to using Cerner in other places say it just isn't, it is not functioning right, something is wrong. And so I brought that to the attention of the VA, and they now have a special person dedicated to figuring out how to make the health record, the electronic health record, operational and smooth and functional. Because if anybody deserves great health care, it's our veterans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. So here's a question. Do you believe implementing a dress code at the high schools is an appropriate course of action to curb gang activity?
I think I probably need to talk with the superintendent. Is there something going on?
They are doing some dress code stuff in terms of, like, both the high schools now are not allowing, I think it's Oakland Raiders jerseys and LA Dodgers, and I think we've had a small uptick in some gang activity around here, so we are sort of limiting some of those clothes that are associated with gangs, but I don't think there's a thought of doing sort of uniform, but they are sort of doing some restrictions, I think.
Okay, let me give that some thought, and I'm concerned if there's new gang activity in our schools.
It's just an uptick, yeah, and you guys are working hard on it. We have proactive mission working hard on it as well, but there is an uptick in our area. You know, the flow of drugs is sort of working its way up from the southern border to the northern border, and it sort of does work its way through some of Moses Lake and even the Wenatchee area.
Well, here, fentanyl, there was a big...
Yeah, we got a 3,000 pill fentanyl bust a week or so ago, and so...
This is a really big deal, and for people out there who have teenagers in their family, you know, anybody who is exposed to kids in school, please have this conversation a million times over with them, that they should not take any pill from anyone, no matter what they say it is, because these fentanyl-laced pills are deadly. Difference between a therapeutic dose, I'm a doctor, so we did use it therapeutically, and a deadly dose is like a hair. I mean, it is something that they cannot be at all not nonchalant about, and every parent should be having this conversation with their children many times over.
So there's a question here that I'll read in a minute, but just sort of overall federal government, COVID relief in terms of both vaccinations and then economics. How did you think all of that went, sort of looking backwards over the last 2 years?
Look, I think some of it was great. I think some of it could have used fine-tuning, and I knew it needed fine-tuning there, but if you tune too finely, by the way, then you can't get help to people quickly when they need it. And I am so proud of the fact that with Operation Warp Speed, the previous administration said, you 6 companies go forth, create vaccines, and if they work, and let me remind you, at that time, work meant 50% reduction in serious illness and hospitalization. I'm going to say that again, because I think we've forgotten what effective was considered when they were developing this. 50% effective in decreasing hospitalization and serious illness. And I think about where we got then, where we got several vaccines that at the beginning were pretty darn close to 100% effective in preventing any disease, preventing transmission of disease, and are still incredibly effective in preventing hospitalization and death. So things have changed a bit with new variants, but boy, was that amazing. And then to have that rolled out and be in hundreds of millions of arms at this point, I think it's remarkable. I think our aid to hospitals was remarkable. I think the fact that we got lunches to children and food to families when they needed it was remarkable. So, yeah, I think we did a lot of things right.
I think you did too, and I think it's remarkable that you get a vaccine out as quickly as our country managed to make that happen. It's pretty remarkable. So Michelle from Wenatchee says, we're talking about healthcare, with World Malaria Day right around the corner, and considering the fact that malaria deaths actually increased by 12% in 2020 for the first time in decades, largely due to the effects of COVID on the global health system, what is the current status of international COVID relief funding when so many low-income countries don't have the same access to vaccines that we do?
Thank you for asking about international health, global health. You know, if there's one thing we've learned is that this is a global pandemic, and that all the variants that really, roared have come at this point from other countries, and then the more that this virus, and frankly any virus, circulates, the more likely it is that we'll have new variants. And we don't know what the next variant will bring, other than it will be more contagious. We don't know if it will be more or less deadly, for example. I am hearing that in many cases, countries have enough vaccine, but they don't have the infrastructure to get those vaccinations into arms. And so we are shipping out a lot of vaccine. We also need to make sure that USAID has the people on the ground, the refrigeration, those kinds of things to get the shots into arms. Unfortunately, globally, we're seeing some of that hesitancy and conspiracy theories that we see here at home that needs to be addressed, because frankly, none of us are safe until all of us are safe. So I strongly overall support global health initiatives.
All right, so Jack from Chelan, thank you for having this town hall meeting. He wants to know if any of these have been put on video or transcripts available from the other ones that you've done. I don't know if you're videotaping any of the town halls or putting them on your webpage or Facebook pages.
We have not, but there's a gentleman here who might share it with you.
Okay, I just was asking. All right. Personal question, how do you keep your spirits up with so many challenges in these days? That's a question. That's Becky. Ask that question.
You remind me of this day that when I was in medical school and I was just walking across a parking lot or something, and a person stopped me and said, "Why are you smiling all the time?" Some of it may just be the way my face is shaped. Some people look like they're smiling. No, here's the thing. I think one of the things that helps is I don't watch TV, so I don't have the constant drumbeat of the crazy that goes on in DC. What I get to do is find partners from both parties. I feel like at a time when people feel like Congress is broken, I can be part of the solution. And so finding Republican doctors to work with to move us in the right direction, finding partners in both parties to work on forest health initiatives, finding partners within our own delegation. Jane Butler and I worked to make WIC, Women, Infant, Children Nutrition Programs, more accessible and to get fruit and vegetable benefits to women and small children. I worked with Dan Newhouse on some really sensible immigration policies like the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. It's a mouthful, but the idea is if you are in this country working in agriculture, putting food on our tables, I consider that a national security issue, and you are not documented, we're going to have a path for you to be here and be right with the law and be able to work legally if you stay in agriculture for a certain number of years. That's a Dan Newhouse bill that I fully support, that we pass through the House in a bipartisan fashion. So I guess that's what those things in DC give me hope. The thing here is every one of the people we help, we've now helped 1,800 people and brought back $16 million to the district on a one-by-one basis. This is a $1,200 Social Security check, a $1,500 benefit from the VA. These add up. $16 million is a ton of money to people and businesses in this community, and that's very, very satisfying.
Well, thanks for doing all that, and you do smile a lot, and it's, from someone who sits not in your job, but a different job, if you dwell forever on the negative, you probably never get up out of bed. So if there's times you just gotta, today's gonna be a better day, and keep focusing on the good things and work on the bad things. So I appreciate you doing that for our district. Regarding child care, COVID relief helped to stabilize child care programs, but didn't solve the underlying challenges that were exacerbated by the pandemic. How do you plan to build on relief and help families, educators, children, and our economy? This is from Nancy in East Wenatchee.
Childcare, I'm looking at you guys for obvious reasons. Childcare was already a problem before the pandemic, and then it just got way worse during the pandemic. And anybody who has had a child, well, I had one 13 years ago, and things were bad then. So let's say in the last 20 years knows how expensive it is to have a child in childcare. And during the pandemic, a lot of those providers, many over 60 years old, many in communities hard hit by COVID, they closed their doors, or parents decided they didn't feel safe taking their children to daycare. So now you have not just crazy expensive childcare, you also have inaccessible. It's not even there if you wanted to pay full price for it. That is why we passed legislation through the House, it has not made it through the Senate, that would cap costs of childcare at no more than 7% of your income. And think about that for a second. I will tell you that it costs at least $1,500 a month to have a baby in childcare right now. So capping it would be tremendous. And I'm a big believer in universal preschool as well, because I think that if you want to talk about giving everybody a fair chance, you do it at preschool.
I think most of the studies dictate that if you're not prepared for kindergarten, your chances of being successful are that much reduced. I think the pre-K stuff is really important.
So important. And by the way, this is another one of those places. I suspect if I had you raise your hands, it would not be like the daylight savings time question. I bet everybody in this room thinks that investing in preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds is a very smart investment, and in fact it pays off. Most people say $7 to $9 in the end for each dollar spent.
Yeah. So Rita from Wenatchee wants to, what can be done to streamline and coordinate care for mentally ill so they don't end up homeless? Probably a question you and I should both try to answer. How do you go first?
Do you want to go first?
How do you go first? It's fine.
It is really the perfect question, because mental illness does not happen in a vacuum. And a lot of things go together. Homelessness, substance abuse, mental illness, physical health. And, you know, that's one of the reasons that we can start with the easy stuff, that I just support universal health care. That's why I support the Affordable Care Act so much, because people can afford to get the care that they need, and that mental health and physical health are supposed to be treated equally. We did just have a hearing in my committee about mental health, about substance use disorder, about all of these programs that we can fund. And, you know, one of the best places that really coordinates everything from substance use treatment to mental health to housing people, there are nonprofits in every community, and I'll let you maybe talk about some of the ones here that really provide all of those wraparound services so that you can get people well, keep them housed, and keep them well. You want to comment?
Yeah, I think most of the studies have shown if you can give someone a place to live, that's got to be the first part, because if you're having mental health issues or drug and alcohol abuse and you're living on the streets, your first issue is where am I going to sleep tonight, as opposed to working on how do I make myself, you know, get out of the repetitive cycles. And so I think housing in our region is that way throughout the United States. It's very expensive and costly, and we need to do a better job to get these folks in places. And we're working on building a low barrier shelter right now as a starting point to get folks into a system where they have to meet with case managers regularly. We give them a place to stay and try to get them in the system. I think one of the biggest issues we sort of have is this fentanyl addiction, and because a lot of these folks are addicted to drugs. And how do you get them off? And you know better than I, being a physician, that fentanyl is one of the most addictive, hard to get off of drugs that man has figured out how to make. And that's a difficult, long process to try to get someone through those processes.
It is, and I'm actually looking at our police officers in the back of the room. I've been out on ride-alongs with police officers all around the district. In fact, I'm hoping for an invitation from the two of you at the end of this evening. And we've talked about that so much of the crime we're seeing is theft, and it's to support a drug habit, and that drug habit is because of fentanyl, because it's so highly addictive. And so having to work on kind of like the push and the pull, reduce the demand, reduce the supply, cut down on crime. But again, that conversation. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, and even I think it was, and the officers were better than me a couple of weeks ago. We had, I think, 4 or 5 fentanyl overdoses under the bridge over, and they all got Narcan. I think only one of them passed away, but I think we saved like 5 or 6 lives with the Narcan. So it's an issue.
The next step is how do we make sure that the next night it doesn't happen again,
well,
right?
Yeah, because you get into the hospital, you get them fixed up, and they go back out and they do it again, and that's the problem. All right, Snake River dams. Where are we at with in terms of maybe removing them or leaving them up? What are your thoughts? This is from Marble.
Well, I believe at this point, the governors, the senators, other interested parties are all working through that. I would love to talk in a broader sense about hydropower and about salmon, because I think those are the 2 issues that are really, that you're truly getting at with this question. First, we are so blessed here in the Northwest to have abundant hydropower, meaning that we can get to about 70% clean energy just from hydropower in this state is astounding. And so I want to express that gratitude, and you know, I hope that we can then use energy efficiently and export some of that clean energy elsewhere. And I am working on this issue of renegotiating the Columbia River Treaty, which somebody who's deep into it probably is thinking about right now. The second thing I want to say when it comes to salmon is that I want to celebrate something about the Howard Hanson Dam. I don't know if you have all heard about this. This is a really big deal. Howard Hanson Dam sits on the Green River. If the dam weren't there, it's there for flood control primarily and drinking water. If it weren't there, the whole Green River Valley, I know it's not here, but you know, Auburn would be under many feet of water several times per year. The dam is necessary for safety. It's also necessary for water, for drinking water for that entire area. The problem is that this dam does not have downstream fish passage. In fact, it didn't have upstream fish passage until fairly recently. The Army Corps of Engineers got to work on this, but then had to stop midway because the expenses were too high. So I read a letter that was signed by every member of our delegation, Democrats, Republicans, House, Senate, all saying, please keep going with the study on how we're going to restore salmon passage at Howard Hanson Dam. And then he went back after the infrastructure bill was passed and said, how can we use those infrastructure dollars, the bipartisan infrastructure law, how can we use those dollars to make sure we get downstream fish passage at Howard Hanson Dam? Because here's the thing, about 100 miles of upstream habitat there that is pristine. Humans can't even go there. This stands to do more for Chinook salmon populations than anything else we've ever done in Washington State. And you know what? We got $220 million this year to start work on Howard Hanson Dam salmon passage. So I'm excited about that.
So it's interesting how you can accomplish things by not actually having to pass a new law. You could just work with the federal agency that's got funding and say, hey, some of this needs to come to a very important. So it's not always about passing laws. It's about working with the agencies to find funding that's already there to help projects in your district.
Well, we passed the law first. In this case, the infrastructure bill. Same one as helping with Highway 18 and helping with Confluence Parkway. So it's just helping to get those dollars to the 8th District.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'm out of questions. I've gone through all of them. How are we doing for time?
We have about 15 minutes left. If there are any questions out there, I'm happy to pick them up. Do you have any questions? Okay. Then I think, yeah.
Any changed minds about daylight savings time? Any spontaneous questions out there?
What was the district consist of? What was the changes on the district?
The changes in the district. So the district kept, with redistricting, it retained most of what was previously the 8th District. And just as a reminder, this district stretches from the tippy top of Lake Chelan, Sistahican, all the way down to Mount Rainier and Edenville, where I was yesterday. And the district, so what they did with redistricting is they cut out most of Auburn and Kent, and then they swung the district up through northern King County up to the upper border of Snohomish County. So now the district includes areas that weren't in before, like Carnation, Duval, Ames Lake, Darrington, Grand Falls.
So I've got some questions here that just came up, and there's a number of them, not all of them we'll get to, but some are sort of for me and some are sort of for you. I'm trying to figure out which ones are better for you. So wildfires, what's going on with wildfire prevention and what do you do on the fuels and that sort of stuff?
I feel like that was a planted question. This has been one of my passions, is working on making resilient forests that won't be so subject to these catastrophic wildfires that you all, I mean, this is one of the big reasons we needed to get the Apple Capital Loop dealt with and funded, because you need evacuation routes and first responders need to be able to get to a fire or another emergency. There's a couple things I would say. First, I pushed really hard together with Kelly and the rest of my team to make sure we got language in that infrastructure bill for forest health. That infrastructure is not just roads, bridges, even not just high-speed internet, that it has to be our natural infrastructure as well. Culverts for salmon, and let's deal with our forests. And that made it in, I mean, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars to help make our forests healthier, thinner, do controlled burns, and frankly, we even have a part in there that I think can be used for a small diameter mill in central Washington, which would be a tremendous win. I just saw some heads come, yes, that is such a big deal. It would bring, first of all, if you're gonna thin the forest, let's get a guaranteed number of trees from the Forest Service, keep a mill operational, bring jobs, lower housing prices, invest in cross-laminated timber. There's a lot of good that would come from that. So that's where we are on Forest Health. And then in Roslyn, I know you're not, one of the community projects that we got, in addition to a place for Alice and NEI broadband, was money for forest health, restoration, controlled burns, thinning, mastication around the town of Roslyn. And I'm very excited because this will protect the city.
Yeah, and that needs to happen there. That's a highly densely question. So another question that I think is more closely for me, which is, first of all, thanking you for the town hall, and then, can property tax be changed to increase only until property is sold? And I think the second is, can construction be required to have solar panels? And I'll take both of those. On the property tax exemption, California's got the one that most people have, which is basically your valuation stays fixed until the property is sold, and then it goes up. And I think what you found in California is, people have figured out ways to gift properties to kids and stuff never gets updated in valuations. And then they just raise fees other places to make up for it. So, and in terms of solar panels, right now we've adopted, at least in the city of Wenatchee, the International Business Code, a building code, and the state's got the state building code that actually requires, not quite solar panels, but so much on energy efficiency in your homes that we almost have to be really careful between, are we driving the cost to build a house too high because of everything that's required on the energy efficiency stuff. It's a very delicate balance. I think the last stuff that we adopted, as we adopt the state codes and the international building codes, I think the contractor said it would add $4,000 or $5,000 to the cost of construction of the house. That versus the energy savings that come with it. So it's an interesting sort of discussion.
It's an upfront cost, but with a very long-term payoff. And I know, energy efficiency, it's not sexy, but it's one of the most important things we can do, especially because we're not going to be able to augment our hydropower much, right? And if everybody's going to electric vehicles at some point in the next couple decades, we're going to need to use the energy that we have efficiently. And so what you're talking about with buildings is going to be critical.
How do you support prevention efforts on substance use in Washington State, particularly regarding nicotine addiction and youth, vaping, those sorts of things?
At the federal level, we passed legislation to remove flavors from e-cigarettes because that is how tobacco companies are now hooking kids. And I think that is one of the most impactful things we can do because you can look at e-cigarettes in a couple ways. One is somebody who's already a smoker wants to get off of tobacco, and this is a way to winnow down the amount of nicotine they use and at least not inhale tar. But in the reverse direction, it's incredibly dangerous. It tastes like watermelon or bubble gum or whatever flavor is intended for kids, gets them hooked on nicotine, and they grow up to be smokers. And we can't have that after so many years of progress, getting kids off of nicotine and cutting down on cigarette use. Think about what that does to our public health.
All right, one more question. Can Operation Warp Speed be applied to cancer and diabetes and other sorts of medical research?
I love that question. There's something called ARPA-H, or some people want to call it HARPA. The idea is this would be a health initiative modeled after DARPA. DARPA is the Defense Accelerated Advanced Research Program. What's the last A? Agency. There we go. So this is where we got ultrasound and radar and the internet, and all of these things came from DARPA. Well, what if we could do that same thing, like Operation Warp Speed, but we do it with healthcare? What if we just put these really smart people who were willing to think outside the box and take some chances that they just won't do at the NIH, they just won't, we need something accelerated where people just kind of throw everything at the wall and try it. What if we did that for Alzheimer's? What if we did that for cancer? So we have had hearings on that in my committee as well, and I'm very excited about it because yes, we do need Evan who asked the question, but yes, you got me super excited about it.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being in Wenatchee. Can we give a round of applause for conversation?
Thank you for coming. And Officer Cook and Sergeant Bernash, thank you very much for being here and keeping us all safe. And I wish you all a very good evening. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.